While the reading of my husband's will was underway, my daughter-in-law whispered to the lawyers, "If the elderly woman causes trouble, just put her in a nursing home." The shock struck me deeply when the lawyer began sharing my husband's last wishes. "I am grateful you are here. Follow my story until the end, and leave a comment with the city you are watching from, so I can see how far my tale has traveled. If the elderly woman causes trouble, just throw her into a nursing home and be done with it." Those words, spoken quietly by my daughter-in-law Stephanie, to the lawyer pierced me like a blade. I remained frozen in the leather chair, my hands tightly clasped in my lap, pretending not to have heard, but every word reached me clearly. The law office suddenly felt suffocating. The ticking of the old clock on the wall became louder with every moment. I had been married to Thomas for 45 years. 45 years filled with shared dreams, morning coffees, and tender moments. Now he was gone, and there I sat, a widow of 69 years, hearing my daughter-in-law scheme to cast me aside as if I were trash. Shall we begin? Mr. Peterson, Thomas's attorney for 2 decades, adjusted his glasses and opened the thick folder before him. My son David sat next to Stephanie, his face wearing the practiced mask of grief. I wondered whether he knew what his wife had just said and whether he agreed. I straightened my posture, the pearl necklace Thomas gave me on our 40th anniversary, weighing heavily around my neck. I would not cry. Not now. Here, but not directly before them. According to Mr. Thomas Wilson's final will and testament, Mr. Peterson began speaking in a formal and emotionless tone. The main home at 1542 Maple Avenue, along with all the furniture and vehicles, is left to his son, David Wilson, and David's wife, Stephanie Wilson. The heir inherited my lungs. Our house, the place where I raised our son, where I looked after the garden Thomas adored very much, where we created a life together, block by block, memory by memory. The amount of $200,000 from Mr. Wilson's retirement funds will be given to Mrs. Barbara Wilson. Mr. Peterson went on without meeting my gaze. Along with a monthly payment of $2,000 for the rest of her life, I felt the room spin. $2,000 in our area would not even cover rent for a decent apartment. After 45 years, this was the value Thomas believed I deserved. The remaining possessions, including Mr. Wilson's investment portfolio, estimated at around $3,200,000, will go to David and Stephanie Wilson. Stephanie's hand met David's, squeezing his in victory. A faint, pleased smile curved on her lips. "This must be an error," I heard myself say, my voice feeling distant and empty. Thomas and I built everything together. I stood by his side for nearly 50 years. Mr. Peterson appeared uneasy, nervously adjusting papers. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, but these are Mr. Wilson's clear instructions. The will was revised 6 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. Half a year ago, when Thomas was already unwell and the medications made him confused and forgetful, Stephanie suddenly became very attentive, preparing homemade meals for him and keeping him company for hours while I rested. "This is absurd," I said, my voice growing stronger, fueled by a wave of anger. "Thomas would never do this. Not to me." Stephanie's expression turned stern. "Barbara, please do not make this more complicated than necessary." Thomas expressed his wishes clearly. "We have to honor that." "Honor?" The word felt bitter on my tongue. "Like you honored me when you proposed sending me to a nursing facility." "Yes, Stephanie, I heard you." David's head whipped toward his wife, confusion evident in his eyes. But Stephanie was skilled at this game. "Barbara, you are obviously upset, which is natural considering your loss, but making accusations will not bring Thomas back." Her words were sweet, yet poisonous. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should pause for a moment." "No," I said firmly. "I want to understand when and why my husband decided to leave me with barely enough to live on, after promising for decades that I would always be cared for." The attorney glanced down at his notes. "The changes took place on the 12th of February. Mr. Wilson was of sound mind when he signed the papers. I personally evaluated his mental state. 12th of February. I recalled that day. I had gone to visit my sister who had fallen and fractured her hip. Thomas had insisted that I go, assuring me he would manage just fine for a few days. Upon my return, Stephanie was there. Papers were scattered across our dining room table, and she claimed she was assisting Thomas in sorting through his medical expenses. I requested a copy of the previous will. Barbara. Finally, David, his voice tense, spoke up. Dad made his choice. Let us not prolong this any longer. I stared at my son, the person I had carried within me, cared for, nurtured, and loved endlessly. When did he become the stranger able to watch his mother lose everything without a word? Copies of all relevant documents will be sent to you, Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Peterson, he said softly. As I prepared to leave, my legs trembling beneath me, Stephanie leaned toward David. We need to put the house on the market right away. The market is hot right now. They did not even plan to wait until I found another place to live. After 45 years of marriage, I had fewer than 30 days to leave my home, my entire life. I stepped out of the office, gathering whatever dignity I had left, burdened by a sense of betrayal that felt almost tangible. Sitting in the parking lot, inside a car that technically now belonged to David and Stephanie, I finally let the tears fall freely. Thomas, how could you betray me like this? How could you abandon me with nothing after all these years? But as the sun began to set, stretching long shadows across the dashboard, something inside me grew resolute. This was far from over. Thomas may have signed that will, but I truly knew my husband. Something felt off. I was determined to uncover the truth about what had occurred during those days I was away. They assumed I was merely a fragile old lady they could easily disregard. They were about to discover just how mistaken they were. Returning home, the house seemed altered that evening, emptier somehow, almost as if it already sensed it would soon no longer belong to me. I wandered through the familiar rooms like a phantom, gently touching the belongings Thomas and I had gathered throughout our lives. The grandfather clock from our 10th anniversary, the hand-carved bookshelf he built when David was born, the worn leather armchair where Thomas had spent countless nights reading, his glasses resting on the tip of his nose. Now all of this belonged to David and Stephanie. I sank into Thomas's chair, inhaling the faint trace of his aftershave that still lingered in the upholstery. How could he have betrayed me like this? The Thomas I had known would never have abandoned me in such a vulnerable state, especially not after promising for decades that I would always be cared for. Suddenly, the sharp ring of the phone broke my reverie. "Mom," David's voice sounded tense. "Are you okay? You left so abruptly." "I'm fine," I lied, clutching the receiver tightly. "Just tired." "Listen, about the house. Stephanie and I have been thinking—" "I don't want to discuss the house right now, David," I snapped, my tone harsher than I intended. After a pause, he replied, "All right, we can talk later. But Mom, we need to start." Contemplating where you might move, Stephanie discovered some appealing retirement communities. Retirement communities? Are you referring to nursing homes? The bitterness in my voice startled even myself. "Mom, they are not nursing homes. They cater to active older adults like you. You would have your own apartment, social events, and neighbors of your own age. People my own age," I repeated in a flat tone. "David, I am not even 70 yet. I am fully capable of living on my own." Another pause followed, this time longer. "We just want what is best for you." "What is best for me?" I laughed, a hollow sound. "Or what suits you and Stephanie?" "Let me guess. These retirement communities would quickly consume the monthly allowance Thomas left me, would they not?" "Mum, that is unfair. We are only trying to support you." "Support? By pushing me to leave my home mere days after your father's memorial? By already organizing my future without consulting me in the slightest? You are upset. I understand." We can discuss things when you feel more reasonable. More reasonable? As if I were a child throwing a fit. Goodbye, David. I hung up before he could reply. My hands trembled while I climbed the stairs to the bedroom Thomas and I had shared for decades. The bed remained unrestored since the morning of the funeral. I could not bear to disturb the final place where Thomas had rested. I opened his closet and let my fingers glide over his well-arranged shirts, each one releasing a flood of memories. The blue Oxford shirt he wore to David's college commencement. The worn flannel shirt he always wore on Saturday mornings while tending the garden lay folded. On the highest shelf at the back of the closet rested a collection of leather-bound journals. Thomas had been diligent in keeping detailed records, chronicling everything from household expenses to planting schedules. I took down the latest one, dated only 3 months before he passed away. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I opened it and found solace in Thomas's recognizable handwriting. Most entries were ordinary notes about his medication routine, doctor visits, short remarks about the weather, or our meals. Then, a particular line drew my attention. Dated February 10th, just 2 days before he modified his will, it read, "Called Jackson about the cabin today. Everything is settled. Barbara will have what she needs when the time comes. Must ensure Stephanie does not learn about the cabin." Thomas and I had spent vacations at a small rental cabin in the Adirondacks years ago, but we never owned any property there, so why would he hide it from Stephanie? I turned more pages, searching for other references. On February 11th, it was noted that the final payment was made that day. All paperwork is with Jackson. The deed is under Bee's name only. Regardless of what happens with the house, she will have a place to go. My heart pounded as I reread the passage. A deed in my name. Thomas had bought property without informing me. Suddenly, the loud slam of a car door in the driveway shattered my thoughts. I glanced out the window and noticed David's silver BMW parked behind my car. Stephanie was with him. Quickly, I returned the journal to its spot and hurried downstairs, reaching the front door just as David's key was turning in the lock. "Mom," he called, stepping inside with Stephanie right behind him. "We brought dinner. Thought you might not feel like cooking," I replied cautiously, eyeing the paper bag from the neighborhood deli. "That's thoughtful." Stephanie's smile did not reach her eyes. "We also brought some boxes. Thought we could help you start going through your things. No hurry, of course, but it's good to get a head start, right?" Boxes. They had brought boxes. The funeral had been only 3 days ago. "That will not be necessary," I said steadily. "I can pack my belongings when the time comes." David shifted awkwardly. "Mom, we're just trying to support you." "David," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "Who is Jackson?" His expression remained unchanged. "Jackson? I don't know anyone by that name." Either he was being untruthful or truly did not know. Considering the secrecy in Thomas's journal, I suspected the latter. "Forget it," I said. "It's not important." Stephanie was already moving into the living room, her critical eyes scanning the furniture. "This room has such wonderful light. I'm thinking we could place my grandmother's antique desk right next to that window." She was already redecorating inside my home while I stood there. "I'm not very hungry," I said abruptly, "and I'm afraid I'm too tired." David frowned and said, "Mom, we traveled all this way for company tonight." She replied, "Please, David, today has been really tough." After they left reluctantly with Stephanie, leaving a pile of flattened boxes in the hallway, I went back to Thomas's journals. I gathered them and sat on the bedroom floor surrounded by the pages. For hours, I sifted through the notes searching for any references to Jackson or the cabin. In a journal from the previous year, I discovered an entry. "Met with Jackson today about a potential investment. The location is remote but stunning with great promise. If all goes well, it could serve as Barbara's safety net. God knows she will need it once I'm no longer here." Thomas had anticipated somehow that I would require a safety net, that I could not rely on David to look out for me, and that Stephanie might attempt to push me aside. But who exactly was Jackson? Where was this property Thomas had seemingly bought for me? I pressed on searching until my eyes ached from exhaustion. As the first light of dawn appeared, I finally uncovered what I had been seeking in one of Thomas's oldest journals, dated nearly 2 decades ago. Assisted Jackson Matthews in launching his law practice today. A modest investment, but he has a bright mind. Catherine's son has great potential with the right guidance. Jackson Matthews, Catherine's son. Catherine was Thomas's secretary during his early years at the firm, before he became a partner. I recalled she had been a single mother, raising a young boy whom she often brought along. During school vacations, Thomas had assisted his son in becoming a lawyer. Now it seemed that this very son held the secret to whatever safety net Thomas had tried to establish for me. I reached for the phone on the bedside table but stopped. What if Stephanie and David were listening to my calls? What if they were already aware of Jackson and attempting to reach him first? No, I had to proceed with caution. I needed to locate Jackson Matthews by myself, without alerting David or Stephanie. Whatever Thomas had entrusted to him was intended solely for me. For the very first time since the reading of the will, a glimmer of hope sparked within me. Thomas had not deserted me. In fact, he had left a clue, a trail to follow, and I resolved to discover it no matter the obstacles. Tracking down Jackson Matthews was simpler than I had anticipated. A basic online search uncovered his law firm, Matthews & Associates, situated just half an hour from our residence. Thomas had never mentioned him to me in recent years, another secret he had kept hidden. I waited until I was sure that David and Stephanie had gone to work before making the call. My hands shook slightly as I dialed. Matthews & Associates, how may I direct your call? A friendly female voice answered. I replied, I would like to speak with Jackson Matthews, please. It concerns Thomas Wilson. A brief pause followed. May I ask who is calling? Barbara Wilson, Thomas's wife, I said. Another pause, longer this time. One moment, Mrs. Wilson. Less than a minute later, a deep voice answered the call. Mrs. Wilson, I was expecting your call. My heart pounded. You were expecting me? I asked. Yes. Thomas made me promise to wait for you to reach out. He believed you would figure everything out by yourself. He always thought you were much smarter than others realized. That sounded exactly like Thomas, always trusting in me even when I had my own doubts. I found his journals, I said, and he mentioned something about a cabin, a deed under my name. Not over the phone, Mrs. Wilson. Could you come to my office today if possible? I looked at the clock, which read just 10 in the morning. I can be there by noon. Perfect. And Mrs. Wilson, please come alone. The drive to Jackson's office seemed to stretch on forever. My mind was filled with questions swirling like clothes caught in a washing machine. What plans had Thomas been making? Why all the secrecy? How long had he suspected that David and Stephanie were not to be trusted? Matthews & Associates were housed in a small brick building downtown. Upon arriving, a young woman with gentle eyes at the front desk led me straight to Jackson's office. Jackson Matthews stood up as I entered. He was in his early 40s. Thomas's journals placed him in his 20s, when Thomas had helped him start his practice. His warm smile instantly made me feel comfortable. Mrs. Wilson, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Thomas spoke about you often. Did he? I replied, sitting down across from his desk. Funny, he never mentioned you to me. Jackson's smile faded with sadness. That was intentional. The project we were involved in had to remain entirely secret. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. About 8 months ago, Thomas came to see me soon after receiving his diagnosis. He was anxious about what would happen to you after he was no longer here. So he was aware, I said softly. He knew that David and Stephanie would try to claim everything. Jackson paused, clearly burdened by his thoughts. He was worried that Stephanie had been manipulating David for years, gradually turning him against both of you. When Thomas became ill, he observed disturbing behaviors that deeply unsettled him. For example, Stephanie started showing a strong interest in his finances. She offered to help organize his documents and asked detailed questions about his investments. Then Thomas overheard a conversation between Stephanie and David. They were talking about how difficult your condition might become after Thomas passed away and how you might require specialized care. I felt a knot in my stomach. "A nursing home," I whispered. Jackson nodded solemnly. At that moment, Thomas decided he had to create a protective plan for you, something untouchable by David and Stephanie. He slid the envelope toward me. Inside is the deed to a property in the Adirondacks. It is not just any cabin. It is a fully remodeled 3-bedroom house sitting on 5 acres of land with a small lake. Thomas bought it entirely in your name. It has been completely furnished and supplied with everything you could possibly need. My hands trembled as I reached for it. I opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. There it was, clear and unmistakable, a deed bearing my name. Photographs slipped out as well, revealing a stunning cedar house surrounded by tall pine trees, featuring a wide porch that wrapped around it, overlooking a crystal-clear lake. I whispered in confusion, "I do not understand. If Thomas wanted to take care of me, why did he change his will to leave me almost nothing? Why did he let David and Stephanie inherit the house?" Jackson leaned closer. "This is where things get tricky. Thomas found out that Stephanie had been pressuring him to alter his will while he was heavily medicated. He feared that if he did not seem to comply, she might escalate her actions, so he gave them what they demanded." Jackson continued, "On the surface, it looks that way, yes, but he made sure you would be cared for. The property is legally yours without any encumbrances. There is more." He handed me another paper. It was a bank statement from an account in the Cayman Islands. I stared at the document, unable to believe what I saw. Over the years, Thomas quietly transferred just over $2 million. It was entirely legal, all taxes were paid, but it was invisible to David and Stephanie, and beyond their reach. I could hardly breathe. Thomas had not abandoned me. He had been protecting me the entire time. Jackson added hesitantly, "There is one last thing. Thomas suspected Stephanie may have interfered with his medication during his last months. He could not prove it, but his episodes of confusion did not match his usual condition. The doctor's concerns about his condition weighed heavily in my mind. The room seemed to spin as I struggled to comprehend the implications. "Are you suggesting she was poisoning him?" I asked. "Not exactly," the doctor replied. "Not poisoning in the strictest sense, but perhaps modifying his dosages to increase his confusion and compliance. That is why he insisted on personally altering his will to give them what they believed they wanted, while ensuring your security through other avenues." I recalled Stephanie's sudden eagerness to bring Thomas his medication, the way she arranged his pillboxes and hovered closely, watching him take each dose. Why had he never shared any of this with me? "Because he wanted to protect you," the doctor explained. "He feared that if you found out, you might confront them, putting both of you in even greater danger." A tear traced its way down my cheek. Even in his last days, Thomas had been thinking of me striving to keep me safe. Jackson then softly produced a sealed envelope from his desk. "Thomas asked me to deliver this to you once you had uncovered the truth." My name was written on the front in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting. I held it close to my heart, not ready to open it just yet. "What should I do now?" I inquired. "That choice belongs entirely to you, Mrs. Wilson. You could relocate to the Adirondacks property right away." Or, the doctor's eyes sparkled, "You could play their game a bit longer and let David and Stephanie believe they have won while you prepare your next steps more carefully." For the very first time since Thomas's passing, I felt a flicker of empowerment. I was not powerless nor at their mercy. I was ready. I believe I carefully expressed that I wanted to give my beloved daughter-in-law exactly what she deserved. Jackson smiled, and Thomas said you would say something like that. He also mentioned you would be absolutely remarkable. I read Thomas's letter alone that evening, sitting in his armchair with a glass of the scotch he cherished. His words, gentle, insightful, and sometimes darkly humorous, brought him back to me for those precious moments. He described how he first noticed Stephanie's manipulation of David many years ago. He had tried to intervene quietly, but realized the grip she had on our son was too powerful. "I failed him, Barbara," he wrote, "but I refuse to fail you. They assume you are just a sweet old woman who will quietly accept whatever crumbs are thrown your way. Show them how mistaken they are." The following morning, I drove to the Adirondacks to check out the property. The winding country roads led to a discreet turnoff, marked only by a small wooden sign that read Willow Point. Thomas often referred to me as his willow, strong yet flexible, able to bend without breaking. The house left me breathless. Hidden among towering pine trees, it was everything I could have dreamed of. Cozy but roomy, with large windows that allowed the natural light to flood the rooms. The wraparound porch faced a small, pristine lake that glittered in the morning sun. Inside, I recognized furniture from our weekend antiquing trips over the years. Pieces Thomas had said were being stored or sold. He had secretly been creating this retreat. The entire place felt like a refuge for me. In the master bedroom, photographs of us adorned the dresser. Our wedding day, trips, and peaceful moments in the garden were all captured in those images. On the nightstand rested a book I had expressed interest in reading several months earlier. Every detail revealed how well Thomas understood me and how deeply he had cared for me. I sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by both sorrow and appreciation. The kitchen cupboards were filled with my favorite foods, and the bookshelves held all the novels I cherished. In the small room overlooking the lake, an easel stood prepared with fresh canvases and paint, reminding me of the art hobby I had given up years before to care for him during his illness. This was more than just a house. It was the home of someone who had genuinely seen me. I spent the day exploring, uncovering new thoughtful details at every corner. As evening came, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset color the lake in hues of gold and pink. For the first time since Thomas's passing, I felt a sense of peace, but also something stronger, a resolve. I refused to fade away quietly. Thomas had left me not just a sanctuary, but a place of empowerment. I intended to embrace it fully. The next day, when I returned home, David's car was parked in the driveway. Inside, I found him and Stephanie in the living room, placing small, colorful stickers on various objects. "Mom," David said, surprised, "where have you been? We have been calling." "I left my phone at home," I answered calmly. I needed some moments to gather my thoughts. Stephanie's smile seemed forced. "We were merely creating inventory tags for insurance reasons. Naturally, you were involved." I placed my handbag down. "How considerate of you." David shifted uneasily. "Mum, we have to discuss the schedule." The real estate agent mentioned that I have been checking out apartments. I cut in. "I believe I found one that suits my budget." The astonishment on their expressions was almost amusing. They had anticipated objections, tears, begging, not calm acceptance. "Oh," Stephanie quickly regained composure. "That is fantastic. Where is it located?" "Just a modest place on the other side of town. Nothing extraordinary, but it fits what I can afford at the moment." David looked guilty, which was somewhat respectable. "Mom, if you require assistance with rent, it will not be necessary." I intervened. "I will manage with the inheritance your father left me." Stephanie smiled broadly. "I am so pleased you are approaching this sensibly, Barbara. It is what Thomas would have wished for." I held back my words. If only she understood what Thomas had truly desired. "I will need several weeks to pack," I said. "This house holds 45 years of memories." "Of course," David responded promptly. "Take all the time you require within reason," he added, glancing at Stephanie. "We were thinking about beginning renovations next month," Stephanie noted. "The kitchen is terribly outdated. The kitchen Thomas and I had remodeled just 3 years ago. I will be gone before then," I assured them. Now, if you will excuse me, I am quite exhausted from my drive. After they departed, I called Jackson. I have seen the house, I informed him. It seems perfect, but I am not ready to inform David and Stephanie about it just yet. What is your plan? He asked. I replied, I need more information regarding Stephanie's behavior throughout Thomas's illness. If she was interfering with his medication, there might be some proof. Jackson fell silent briefly. What exactly do you hope to achieve? Barbara asked. I answered calmly, justice, and perhaps a chance to break the spell she seems to have cast over my son. The following morning, I reached out to Thomas's doctor and arranged a meeting, explaining that I sought closure about his final days. Dr. Levine agreed to meet me later that day. In the doctor's office, I carefully guided the talk toward Thomas's medication routine. I was taken aback by how rapidly his confusion worsened near the end, I mentioned. It appeared so sudden. Dr. Levine frowned thoughtfully. Yes, that is unusual. His decline was swifter than one might expect given the disease's course. Could his medication have contributed to that? He hesitated for a moment. Possibly, if the dosages were incorrect, but Stephanie assured me she followed the prescribed schedule precisely. I kept my tone even and said, Stephanie was the one managing his medication. Yes, she insisted on handling that responsibility and said you were too overwhelmed, he replied. He paused and asked, was that not the agreed plan? I responded softly, no, it was not. His expression shifted. Mrs. Wilson, is there something I should be aware of? I took a deep breath and said, Thomas altered his will during that confused period. He left nearly everything to David and Stephanie, despite assuring me for many years that I would be taken care of. Dr. Levine's expression grew more serious. That does not resemble the Thomas I remember. He spoke about you with such dedication. Is there any chance we can demonstrate that his medication was not being handled properly? He paused to think. We did perform blood tests during his last weeks. The results should be available in his records. I can examine them to see if there is anything unusual. I replied, I would be grateful for that. And doctor, please keep this conversation confidential from my son and daughter-in-law. Upon leaving his office, my phone rang. It was Jackson Barbara. I discovered something intriguing. Last year, Thomas had surveillance cameras installed in your house. The recordings were backed up on a protected server. My heart skipped a beat. The cameras were primarily positioned in his study, the kitchen, and your bedroom, focusing mainly on his medication area and the desk where he kept important documents. Did he ever explain why? I asked. He suspected someone was rifling through his papers whenever both of you were away. At first, he suspected the housekeeper, but it turned out to be Stephanie, Jackson concluded. The footage is likely extensive and will require time to review. I will assist you immediately, I said. Where can I access it? Come to my office tomorrow. We will arrange a secure place to watch it. That evening, while sorting Thomas's clothes, pretending to pack, but actually searching for more evidence, I heard the front door open. David called out, Mom! I came downstairs to find him standing uneasily in the hallway alone. Is Stephanie not with you? I inquired. He shook his head. I wanted to talk to you, just the two of us. We settled in the kitchen, the place where I had prepared countless family dinners and where Thomas and I shared our morning coffee for many years. Mom, I understand this is difficult, David began. But Dad wanted this, didn't he? I interrupted sharply. Did he actually say that was his wish? Or was it Stephanie who told you? David's jaw clenched. Why do you always criticize Stephanie? She has only been supportive. Has she really? Or has she been quietly turning you against me over time? I challenged. That's absurd. Is it? I countered. When was the last time you came to see us without her? When did you last call me just to talk like before? He remained silent. David, your father was not himself when he altered his will. He was confused and disoriented. The lawyer claimed he was of sound mind. The lawyer only spent 20 minutes with him. I lived with him and witnessed the changes after Stephanie began managing his medication. Suddenly, David stood up. I'm not going to endure these accusations. As he moved toward the door, I called out, Look in your father's medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Behind the extra towels, he kept a journal recording every pill and moment of confusion. David paused, hand on the doorknob. For a split second, I thought he might reconsider. Instead, he left, slamming the door behind him. Yet, I knew I had planted the seed. And the next day, I was ready to start going through the recordings that might at last uncover the reality about Stephanie and what she had done to my husband. For 3 days, I remained in Jackson's office, analyzing the footage captured by Thomas's hidden cameras. What I discovered confirmed my deepest fears and shattered my heart once more. Stephanie, believing no one was observing, was seen opening Thomas's pill organizer and swapping his medications, carefully recording the original order in a little notebook so she could rearrange them before I got back home. Thomas became more confused after taking the pills she gave him. The most painful betrayal appeared in a clip from February 12th, the day the will was altered. Thomas struggled to hold his head up while signing the document Stephanie presented to him. David stood silently in the background, neither joining nor stepping in. Jackson whispered, "This is illegal." The footage showed elder abuse, medication interference, and possibly fraud if Thomas was not mentally sound while signing. I asked, "Do you have enough to involve the police?" He answered, "More than enough." But Jackson questioned, "Barbara, are you certain this is what you want? It could destroy your family." I thought of David, my one and only child, the boy who once wept when he accidentally crushed an ant, the teenager who stood up for smaller kids against bullies, the young man who had once been gentle and honorable. I finally said, "My family is already broken, but I want one last chance to reach my son." The following day, Dr. Levine contacted me saying, "Mrs. Wilson, I have reviewed Thomas's blood tests from his final months. The medication levels varied greatly, sometimes excessively high, and at other times too low. This does not align with what we expect from correct dosing." I asked cautiously, "Could this have happened by mistake?" fully aware of the likely answer, given the repeated irregularities. "No, this seems intentional. Could you please put that in writing?" After a moment's hesitation, I agreed, saying, "For Thomas's sake, yes." Equipped with the doctor's statement and the most incriminating video recordings, I felt prepared. I reached out to David saying, "We need to discuss something. Just you, me, and Stephanie concerning the house. We've talked about this before, Mum. Just one talk, David, and then I promise I will never bring it up again." He sighed deeply and replied, "All right, dinner tomorrow then." That arrangement was ideal. The whole day was spent not only assembling the proof, but also bracing myself emotionally. This confrontation demanded every ounce of my conviction and calmness. They arrived promptly at 7 in the evening. Stephanie wore a stylish new dress, while David looked exhausted and worn out. "Something smells amazing," Stephanie commented with her usual practiced smile. "Thomas's favorite pot roast," I answered, feeling it appropriate. We exchanged uneasy pleasantries during the main course. Once I served coffee and dessert, David finally initiated the topic. "Mom, regarding the house, Stephanie found a wonderful apartment for you at Oakwood Gardens. It is a community for seniors, very lively and reasonably priced," Stephanie added. "The stipend from Thomas should be sufficient." "Absolutely." I took a sip of coffee. "How considerate." However, before we dive into that, I wanted to ask about February 12th. They exchanged looks. "What about that day?" David inquired. "It was the day Thomas altered his will. Both of you were present, weren't you?" Stephanie's smile tightened. "Thomas requested our assistance in organizing his affairs. He was worried about you, Barbara. He intended to ensure David could care for you properly, by nearly leaving me without anything." "Mom," David's tone was cautionary, "we've been over this before." "Yes, we have. But we have yet to discuss why Thomas was so disoriented that day, or why his blood tests showed abnormal medication levels. Stephanie's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. What do you mean? I pulled out the folder I had prepared and slid Dr. Levine's report across the table. Thomas's physician discovered irregular medication levels in his body, consistent with purposeful mismanagement. David frowned while reviewing the report. This does not constitute proof. Medications can interact. You are right, I interrupted. That in itself is not conclusive. I placed my tablet on the table and turned the screen towards them. This is evidence, I said, pressing play. The video revealed Stephanie in Thomas's study, carefully opening his pill organizer, switching pills between compartments, and jotting notes in her small book. The color left Stephanie's face. David stared at the screen and then at his wife. "What is this?" he murmured softly. I proceeded to play the next recording. February 12th. Thomas, barely awake, was signing documents with Stephanie guiding his hand. David, looking uneasy, stood in the background, silent but clearly uncomfortable. "Turn it off," Stephanie snapped. "Why?" I asked calmly. "Does the truth disturb you?" "Mom," David's voice trembled. "Where did this come from?" Thomas had set up cameras when he suspected someone was interfering with his medication. He was trying to shield himself. To protect me. Suddenly, Stephanie rose abruptly, declaring this nonsense. "You have clearly doctored this footage because you cannot handle that Thomas wanted to secure his son's future." I responded, "Dr. Levine has already examined it, as has Jackson Matthews, Thomas's other attorney." David looked puzzled. "Other attorney?" I explained. "The one who helped Thomas establish a trust for me. The one holding the deed to my new home in the Adirondacks and overseeing my account in the Cayman Islands." Stephanie's face twisted in fury. "You are lying." "Am I?" I said. Thomas knew what Stephanie was doing. He played along to protect both himself and me. He let Stephanie believe she had succeeded, while he quietly created a safeguard she could never breach. I turned to my son. "David, did you know what she was doing to your father?" His expression was stunned. "No, Mom, I swear. I knew she wanted him to change the will, but I never imagined." He glanced at Stephanie. "Tell me you did not do this." Her control faltered. "You think I did this for myself? I did it for us. Your parents had everything while They faced difficulties managing mortgage payments and car loans. We earned these troubles, they thought. So, you deliberately harmed my father?" David's voice was almost a whisper. "I did not harm him. I merely altered things to make him more reasonable." He was already facing death anyway. The silence after her outburst was overwhelming. David looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Leave," he finally demanded. "David, leave my mother's house," Stephanie said sharply. "Now." She grabbed her purse, every move charged with anger. At the doorway, she glanced back with a warning. "This is not finished. You believe you have won, but I will keep fighting. That will is legally valid." "Actually," I responded quietly, "a will signed under pressure while being medicated is not legally valid at all. Nor is one signed by someone whose judgment was affected by tampering with their medication. But go ahead and explain all this to the police." After she stormed off, David sank into a chair, burying his head in his hands. "Mom, I had no idea. I swear I did not know she was altering my father's medication." "But you knew she was coercing him to change the will." He nodded sorrowfully. "She kept insisting it made sense for you to have a monthly allowance, rather than trying to keep up this large house on your own. That we could care for you better if we controlled the assets. And you trusted her." "I wanted to trust her." His voice cracked. "I was weak, selfish. Dad would be so disappointed in me." I reached out across the table and took his hand. "Your father loved you, David, but he was concerned about the impact Stephanie had over you. How long had it been?" He swallowed deeply. How long had she been interfering with his medication? At least 3 months according to the footage. Could this have accelerated his passing? That was the question I had been grappling with for days. Dr. Levine believes it is possible. The inconsistent dosing placed extra strain on his body. David's expression fell apart. Oh, God. We remained silent for a long moment. What happens now? He eventually inquired. That depends on you, I replied softly. The evidence either goes to the police or it does not. That decision is mine, but what you do next is yours. Spring arrived in the Adirondacks with a burst of wildflowers and birdsong. I sat on my porch watching a pair of cardinals flit among the pine trees. Thomas had always adored cardinals. He said they reminded him of me, bright and resolute. Morning, Barbara. My neighbor Elilana greeted me as she passed by on her routine walk. I waved back, smiling. 6 months had elapsed since that crucial confrontation with Stephanie and David. 6 months of healing, rebuilding, and regaining my balance in this new life. The legal matters had been thankfully brief. Once faced with the evidence against her, Stephanie consented to an amicable divorce and returned everything she had taken in exchange for me not pursuing criminal charges. The house on Maple Avenue was sold, with the proceeds divided as Thomas would have wanted, half to me and half to David. I had decided to make Willow Point my permanent home. The town carried countless memories, some filled with joy, others marked by sorrow. Surrounded by towering pines and the soft sounds of the lake gently brushing the shore, I found a sense of calm. Suddenly, my phone vibrated with a message. David, оставить имя часто встречается и не требует замены, had just landed and expected to arrive around lunchtime. He asked if I needed anything from the town. My heart softened. These monthly visits had become our special ritual as we slowly mended the bonds between us. It was far from flawless. There remained times of unease and sudden resurfacing of painful recollections, yet we persisted. That effort was meaningful. I replied, "Only yourself. Drive carefully." Meanwhile, I peeked at the lasagna baking in the oven, David's favorite since he was a child. The aroma of herbs and tomato sauce filled the house, comforting and warm. I had spent the earlier part of the day baking bread and tossing a fresh salad from vegetables I had nurtured in my recently started garden. Gardening had originally been Thomas's passion, not mine, yet I had embraced it as a tribute to him. To my surprise, I discovered real happiness in it, enjoying the sensation of soil slipping through my fingers and watching tiny seedlings grow into vibrant greenery. My very first tomatoes were small and oddly shaped, but they tasted sweeter than anything I had ever eaten. The guest room was fully prepared for David's overnight visit, complete with soft towels in the bathroom and crisp sheets laid on the bed. On the small desk in the corner, I had placed a delightful surprise. Old photos I uncovered while unpacking, showing David as a child, joyfully constructing sandcastles with Thomas by the beach. I had come to understand so much from those frozen moments in time. I cherished these moments of getting ready, the calm sense of anticipation before reconnecting. After many years of being a wife and mother, I was finally exploring who Barbara truly was by her own definition. The crunch of tires on gravel signaled David's arrival. I smoothed my now completely silver hair, no more dye for me, and went to welcome him. He stepped out of his car, looking more at ease than I had seen in a long time. His divorce from Stephanie had taken a toll. Stress and shame had initially carved deep lines around his eyes. Yet bit by bit, the son I remembered started to resurface. "Mom," he said, embracing me tightly, "you look amazing." I teased him back, "Not so bad yourself," noticing his healthy complexion. "California suits you." The offer for a job in San Francisco had arrived 3 months after the divorce. A fresh beginning, he explained, a chance to rebuild my life away from whispers and sideways glances. We both shed tears when he told me at the thought of him so far away, him at the thought of leaving me alone. "It's just a plane ride," I reassured him. "We will make this work. And we did. During lunch, David shared stories about his new role, his new apartment, and the hiking group he had joined. I spoke about my garden, painting classes, and the book club I had started with Eleanor and several other women in town. "You seem happy, Mom," he observed, taking a second helping of lasagna. "Really happy?" I confirmed, realizing that despite everything, the betrayals, the losses, and the grief, I truly was happy. I found my path to joy. After lunch, we strolled down to the lake. The afternoon sunlight danced on the water while a soft breeze whispered through the leaves above us. "I discovered more of Dad's journals," David said as we settled on the old wooden dock. It reminded me of the days when I first began seeing Stephanie. I waited quietly, giving him the room to share more. He said he recognized it, how she was controlling me, pushing me away from both of you. He tried to alert me, but I refused to hear it. Then he skipped a stone across the lake's surface. I was completely blind to it all. "We all have moments we fail to see clearly when it comes to love," I replied softly. "You believed in what you wished was true." David's voice cracked as he said, "I miss him so much. I keep replaying the talks we'll never have, and the occasions I miss to truly understand him and learn." I grasped his hand and assured him, "Your father always knew you cared for him, David, no matter what." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "Last night I dreamed he was sitting here on this very dock, fishing peacefully. When I joined him, he said, 'She's going to be fine, son. Barbara is stronger than both of us combined.' I laughed with a tear slipping down. That sounds just like Thomas." We sat quietly together, watching the sun slowly dip toward the horizon. At last David spoke. "I've been considering moving back east." My heart skipped a beat. "Not right now," he added. "Maybe in a year or two, when my current contract finishes. There's a satellite office in Boston, which means a shorter flight and more frequent visits. You don't have to base your choices on me." I told him, "I want you to live your life, David. I understand, but family matters. Dad taught me that, even if I lost sight of it for a while." He paused before saying, "There is someone I want you to meet as well. Her name is Claire. She is a pediatrician." "You are dating?" I couldn't conceal my astonishment. After Stephanie, I assumed it would take years before David could trust again. He nodded with a shy grin on his face. "It is new, but it is good. She's kind, Mom. Truly kind. I would love to meet her." Later that night, once David had gone to sleep, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine. The sky was clear, and stars were scattered across the dark velvet expanse, like precious gems. I thought about Thomas, the life we had shared, and the gift he left me. In the end, it was not just about financial protection, but also an opportunity for a fresh start. I pulled out his letter from my pocket. I had read it so many times that the paper was soft and creased along the folds, yet the words still brought me solace. "My dearest Barbara, if you are reading this, then you have found your way to Willow Point, just as I knew you would. You were always the clever one. I apologize for the deceit, for not telling you what Stephanie was up to. I was trying to shield you, although maybe I should have trusted your strength more. You have always been the oak to my willow, bending through the storms but never breaking. This place is my final present to you, not just a home, but a future. Create those landscapes you have always dreamed about. Cultivate that garden. Forge new friendships. Live fully, my dear. Remember me, but do not cling to sorrow." We shared 45 remarkable years together. Now the moment has come for you to begin the next chapter on your own terms. I will love you forever, Thomas. I folded the letter with care and set it aside. Gazing out at the starlit lake, I lifted my glass in a quiet salute. "I am living, Thomas," I murmured into the night, "just as you wished." The following morning, David and I enjoyed breakfast on the porch. He had extended his visit by an additional day, a simple gesture that meant more than he realized. "I was reflecting," I said, handing him his coffee. "That bedroom at the end of the corridor could be an ideal art studio. Perhaps I will finally begin painting earnestly." Dad would appreciate that." David grinned. "He always claimed you were talented. He exaggerated." I chuckled. "But it makes me happy. And that is what counts." As we sat there designing my studio, discussing David's future, a deep wave of gratitude swept over me. Not only for the financial stability Thomas ensured, but also for this renewed bond with my son, for the chance to explore who I am beyond wife, beyond mother. Thomas gifted me the greatest blessing of all, the liberty to redefine myself at 69. To realize that life can still offer amazement, meaning, and joy even after profound loss. I am not merely enduring, I am flourishing. Building a life rich with purpose according to my own rules was my goal. At some point, I was sure that Thomas was smiling down on me. Now I want to turn the attention to you, the one hearing my tale. What actions would you take if you found yourself in my situation? Have you ever experienced something like this? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I am leaving links to 2 other stories that have become favorites on this channel, and they will surely catch you by surprise. Thank you for staying with me until the end.